Hi, so today we'll be talking about the ethics of product development or how you can be a responsible producer of a product. So, how do we approach ethics of product development? So, we usually have two premises for this. The first one is an unregulated or a free market and a regulated market. So, there are certain theories under an unregulated market. So, the first one is that there is no government intervention in an unregulated or a free market. Okay, a free market will correct itself, or the theory under this is that a free market will correct itself with regards to product safety. So the idea here is that consumers will purchase safer products. So naturally, if you're a consumer, you're going to choose a product that is safe. Okay. And as a result, companies will tend to invest more in safer products to get consumers to buy their product. So for example, kung may, let's say you're producing medicine. Okay. Under an unregulated market, the theory says that a company, a pharmaceutical company, will invest more in safer medicine because they know that consumers would always choose to purchase safer products. But the problem with this is that buyers often do not have enough information on products. So, for example, if I ask you to choose between Biogesic and Tempra, okay, or which one would be the better product? So maybe common buyers might not have the right information, or sabihin natin comparing two cars. Okay? It's not all the time that buyers have extensive information on purchasing products. And there are certain buyers who are often not rational about risk and probability. So for example, if you're buying a new phone, sometimes they might offer you extra insurance for an additional cost. So maybe for some buyers, they might not take that because they know that, okay, what are the chances of you dropping your phone? Okay, what are the chances na masira yung phone mo? Okay, so oftentimes, buyers are not really rational about risk. So buyers often would take risk to save on cost. And there are many markets that are monopolies or oligopolies. And so, for example, if you would remember your economics where companies usually follow uh, the economic trend for pricing. Okay, monopolies and oligopolies are not bound by that. So, for example, Meralco. Okay, if Meralco wanted to increase their prices, okay, a lot of markets really have no choice, di ba? Parang hindi ko naman pwedeng hindi mag-Meralco unless you have enough money for solar or other forms of generating electricity. But more often than not, you have to deal with Meralco's pricing. Yeah. So these are the problems with the unregulated market. It's not all the time that it will work, and it's very rare to see this in a real world scenario. Okay. Which is why more often you have what we call a regulated market. Okay, and there are three theories or under a regulated market: your contract view or contract theory, due care theory, and social cost theory. Okay, so for the first one, under a contract theory, okay, a firm has moral duties to customers, and that's created by their contractual relationship. So, for example, pag bibili ka ng isang gamit, let's say from SM, okay, you form a contractual relationship. So, okay, the firm or the business has this duty to give you a product that you're paying for, and you have a duty to pay for it. So that's what we mean by a contractual relationship. It's not necessary na may pipirmahan kayo or you have to sign something, but more of a relationship is formed between you as a buyer and the merchant as a seller or the business as a seller. And there are four duties under the contract theory. So the first one is the duty to comply. Okay? So duty to comply means that, okay, under the contract theory, that they provide a product that lives up to their claim. So if they say that a product can do this and that, the product should be able to deliver what is promised to the consumer. Because that's the main reason you're buying a certain product. So for example, yung cell phone, it promises that it has good battery life, a nice screen, okay, maganda yung camera, etc., etc., the product is supposed to deliver that, okay? That is because that's what you're paying for. Next is the duty of disclosure. This informs consumers of product characteristics that could affect this purchase. So for example, if you're buying a product off FB Marketplace, it's very important that you're careful kasi sabihin natin bibili kayo ng kotse, you're planning to buy a car. Okay, you have to know certain characteristics of the product to know if it's a good buy. So for example, may mga scratches ba yung car, binaha na ba yung car, or was it flooded, was it ever in an accident? And the seller has this duty to disclose to you as a buyer the important things that could affect your purchase. Kasi for example, baka naman hindi mo na bilhin yung product if you knew that the car was flooded or na total wreck na bangga na siya. Or siguro sabihin natin sa cellphone, baka kung alam mo na sira yung battery, hindi mo na siya bibilin. Or if you knew that, sabihin natin cellphone, alam mong ninakaw siya, this could affect your purchase of the product. Now, duty to not misrepresent is the buyer, or I mean the seller has this duty not to give you false information to elicit a purchase. So for example, nagbebenta ako ng handbag, let's say Gucci, okay? If I tell you that this fake Gucci bag that I'm selling is real so that you can buy it, that's my failure to misrepresent, okay? Or my failure to my duty to not misrepresent. The difference between misrepresentation and disclosure is that disclosure simply means that you're not saying anything about the product, but you're not actively lying to your consumer, which is what happens in misrepresentation. So this one is you're actively telling the consumer false information. So parang yan yung ano natin, dilemma natin na if you withhold information, is it considered as lying? Yan. If withholding information is your failure to duty of disclosure, while actively giving false information or lying is failure to do your duty not to misrepresent. And the last one is duty not to coerce. So this the seller has his duty to desist from unduly influencing consumers to purchase a product. So a good example of this is, for example, sabihin natin ako as your teacher, nagbebenta ako ng Yema. Okay. Sabihin ko, okay, if you buy my Yema, okay, lahat ng bibili may plus points sa quiz. That unduly influences you as students to purchase the product. Okay? Or for example, nagbebenta ako ng kotse. Sige, pag nakabenta ako ng mga kotse sa parents nyo, bibigyan ko kayo ng bonus or bibigyan ko kayo ng additional gift. That is using my influence to elicit a purchase. And I'm influencing your behavior na kahit ayaw nyo bumili, napapabili kayo. Because that is duty not to coerce. Okay? The problem with contract theory is that assumes makers deal directly with consumers. So for example, when you buy a cell phone, it's not all the time that you're dealing with Apple or Samsung. Sometimes you can buy from FB Marketplace, Shopee, third-party outlets. Okay? So you don't always directly deal with consumers. Hindi naman parang pupunta kayo sa factory ng Apple, doon kayo bibili ng cellphone. More often than not, you make deals with third-party retailers. Okay? And sellers can remove duties by making disclaimer. That's why sometimes you would see once you leave the shop, hindi nyo na pwedeng isoli yung gamit, or you can't return certain things after a certain period of time. Okay, so they can remove duties by making certain disclaimers that discourages you from chasing after them if they fail to do their duties. And the contract theory assumes that consumers and sellers meet as equals even if the seller has more knowledge. For example, going back to the example of a second-hand car. Me as a seller, I probably know more about the car than you as a buyer. Kung sabihin natin, bebentahan kita ng kotse, alam ko na yung mga problema ng kotse na to. So I know if it's been flooded, ano yung mga certain problems. But you as a consumer, a buyer, pag hindi ka namang car expert or hindi ka mekaniko or not a mechanic, okay, you wouldn't know these things. So we're not meeting as equals. I have more knowledge. Okay? So these are the problems with contract theory. The next theory is what we call the due care theory. And what this theory states is that producers take special care to ensure consumer interests are not harmed by their products. So the producers um, take precautions so that you're not harmed by the products they make. So for example, yung mga car manufacturers, they put in safety features. Okay, when you for example, yung sa ball pen, the famous example of a ball pen where kaya may butas yung pen cap is that so if a child swallows it, hindi siya mamatay, they can still breathe. So the due care theory states that producers take precautions to ensure that you're safe from their products. And so duties under due care is that they research and design products to minimize risk. So for example, anong klaseng design ng packaging to avoid children from consuming it, or should they put a warning label sa Baygon para hindi nyo inumin yung laman o spray sa mukha nyo. Okay? So they research and design products so that they can minimize the risk that the consumer will take. And there are strict quality control to eliminate defects. Kaya very important in business yung what we call quality assurance or QA. So for example, pag bibili ka ng product from the factory, they have to double check if it passes all the quality control requirements. So, ayan, let's go back to the example of cars. When you purchase a car, they have to check if all the safety features are working, hindi ba siya basta-basta na lang mag-start, or yung brake niya ba hindi siya 50-50 na 50% gagana, 50% hindi. Okay? So they have strict quality control, especially if there's a high risk of injury or death from the product. Okay? So next is they provide users information about safety and dangers and do not market to those who cannot avoid risk. Okay? That's why you have a lot of products na nakasulat, do not eat, caution, poisonous. These things provide information to the users na, okay, you have to take these safety precautions. So, for example, yung sa Baygon, like try to find a can of Baygon or spray inside your house, and you would often see things like flammable, okay, do not give to children under the age of blank. And these warning labels and caution labels are something that prevent those accidents. Ayan. Now, the next one is what we call the social cost view. And this one dictates that there's a strict liability for manufacturers to bear the cost of injuries from defects foreseen or unforeseen regardless of fault. So kahit sino may kasalanan, the social cost view tells you that the manufacturer or the producer of the product must bear the cost of injuries. And cost of product injury should be applied to the purchase price. That's why certain products have a higher price because companies will include the pricing or the expense in the price of the product as an allowance for injuries. So in case something goes wrong, they have money to pay for that. And of course, as with all the other theories, companies will create safer products to avoid this liability. If they know their product can cause injuries, they'll try to create safety features or safer products to avoid the liability or to avoid paying for injuries or anything unforeseen. Now, the problem with social cost view is that it's often unjust to manufacturers because of unforeseen injuries. So there are a lot of things that you can't foresee. For example, habang nagda-drive ka, biglang tinamaan ka ng kidlat. Okay, hindi naman siguro na-foresee ng manufacturer mo na tatamaan ka ng kidlat. Or while you're driving, biglang may nahulog na boulder from the sky kasi sumabog yung volcan somewhere. Okay, these are things that manufacturers cannot foresee. They can't foresee every possible accident or outcome of a certain event. Okay, so and it falsely assumes prevention of accidents. So, for example, the social cost view assumes that you can prevent a lot of the things that can go wrong. But more often than not, kaya nga tawag sa kanya accident is because it's something that we can't prevent. Okay? So, and it also encourages consumer carelessness. For example, may napagtripan niya na, uy, bakit kaya flammable yung naka-label sa Baygon? Try natin ilapit sa apoy. So it encourages these types of behaviors. And consumers may often be the cause of the accident, not the product. Okay, search nyo lang sa YouTube, for example, yung mga, a lot of people trying out really dumb stuff. Yung, for example, yung mousetrap. Yung tatalon sila into a trampoline full of mousetrap. I'm pretty sure the person who made the mousetrap was like not expecting that. Or for example, yung maglalapit sila ng lighter para gawing flamethrower yung Baygon or yung hairspray. I'm pretty sure the hairspray manufacturer did not expect those things to happen. And if anything happens, it's very unjust towards the manufacturer na sila may kasalanan. Which is, in conclusion, a business needs to consider the different costs when both social and human to the creation of the product. Okay, so they have to check in on how safe their product is. They have to make a product that is safe because it incurs costs for the business, and of course, it also, in the long run, ruins the image of the business. So if you're a business that makes unsafe products, that can stick with your brand, which is something that you don't want as an entrepreneur or as a businessman, na yung brand mo kilala for unsafe products. Because that will turn away customers from buying your product, especially now that there are a lot of information that goes around on the internet, diba? So for example, hindi okay yung kotse ni Mazda or ni Honda, for example, then people will tend to avoid that brand. They'll go to other brands, which is more often than not the competitor of the brand that was bad-mouthed. So a business needs to consider the cost of the creation of their product, okay? Both financially and even to the image of the company. Thank you.